Hi, we're recording. Oh, feel free to turn your video off if you want. Sometimes it's less distracting to the recording, I think, as well. Hi, everyone. This is a new format we're doing with the Ecclesia Framework. We're calling it just a dialogue group where anyone can come and bring questions, testimonies, and it's just everybody can chip in, answer, a way of building relationship, and giving people a chance to form community as well. We did one last time, 3 weeks ago, which you can get the recording from, but I really felt led at the time to just share a little bit about ages as we were dialoguing. Yeah, it really became clear in my spirit that there was something I needed to highlight to help people understand what we're dialoguing about. And that initially is around the understanding of ages, which has been quite profound, I think, for many of us who've experienced it. And it's just really understanding the concept of keeping moving on, and we all operate out of a particular age, and understanding what age that is. And we've done a page on Ecclesia Framework that talks about the different ages, so we won't go into it now, but the concept is everything you listen to here from how you operate is from a certain age. So if we can understand that, we can see how we can be challenged to keep moving on and not taking camp. And the other thing I just felt really led to share today is, it was really pressing on my spirit yesterday as I was thinking about this call. And I felt the Father really wanted to affirm the magnitude of what we're doing here, and the importance of constantly looking at the big picture and seeing how big it is, not to settle for the heaven or the course, or it's angels, or it's about healing and getting your own life sorted. Blown away by the extent of what we're being shown and the magnitude of what we're I felt that I needed to share that, and I was supposed to share around that. It's so hard to describe the extent of it, but I've been on my scroll. The more you will see how high calling or anxiety. And there was a time when we Christians were the dominant force, and we were the ones that set the nature of society. And that, I think, is what we're part of what we're trying to restore, is the immense authority that we're called to have. And I think that's why we must move at a fairly speedy pace with a lot of the material, because there's so much that we have lost over the centuries, and without moving fast, we will just contain this new movement to a small element, or we will. That was the other thing I felt I had to say. One thing I was shown right at the start was how we'd slowed down the disciple-making process to a snail's pace. We had made it so slow by the way we did it, and it was affecting our final destiny. For example, we'd often, I mean, in Australia we had small groups once every fortnight. Most people would just go to that. They would wait for that small amount of content. A lot of it would be about just generally getting to know people. So there wasn't a great deal of spiritual content. There wasn't a lot of follow-up outside those sessions, not a lot of mentoring, not a lot of people engaging God in their own time and then coming with something to bring. So we really had slowed it down such that we were not, the structure did not facilitate us having immense revelation and then processing that. And I think that's what this restructuring of the new wineskin has done, that it has changed things around such that most of us now are processing and engaging in heaven all day. So we've got a lot to bring. We've got a lot of hunger, passion, and therefore we're growing at an immense rate. And because we're growing, we're able then to take the next revelation on. And I think that's the issue. If we don't absorb quickly some of the basics, we get overwhelmed so quickly with more advanced revelation. So that's where we've got to seek to really apply this and not be a head knowledge where we just learn something. Oh, that's very nice. Okay, I'll wait for the next session till somebody teaches me a new principle. And that system really, I really sense the Spirit saying it will not work, because this whole heavenly realms thing is about what's the word? Living from the river of life. So it has to be real, vital application, encounters in heaven, and that's and the moment it gets to be head knowledge, it becomes very dry, because a lot of us are used to now such immense encounters and revelation that if we're not having that kind of environment, it gets dry quickly. So I guess that's probably my best attempt at saying what I saw yesterday, about the magnitude really of what we're being called to. So I'll just open it up and see if anyone's got anything that's either from that or a completely different question or a testimony or anything they want to share. Please feel free.
For me, it's been a process of more and more from the heart and less from the head and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's a really good thing. And the other thing is I've gone back through some of your pages and just gone down the list of experiences that you list here and there. And once you get into this heart mode, you can click into things and just do them very easily and very quickly and pick it up very quickly.
Yeah, it is true. Yeah.
Point there that I was feeling like I was missing pieces here and there, and I'm still feeling that way somewhat. Still move forward, and if you really need it, it'll come to you along the way. But also those pages kind of are filling in the gaps for me as I go back and review through them.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I must just say, I meant to actually just ask us all just to step in together, because one thing I was shown was that even this form of dialogue can be a form of encounter and operating out the tree of life. because I know it's easy to think, oh well, if we have a dialogue when we're just doing knowledge and we're back to knowledge, but that's what I was shown, that because we're all now so entwined in heaven, that when we talk, we actually talk out of the wisdom of heaven. So that's my heart for today, is that we step in together and we draw on the wisdom from heaven as we speak. So it's really inspired session, and we're not just sharing our own opinions. Anyone else got anything that's going on for them, or?
I'll jump in just to make sure I've said hello to everyone. I've mostly been following the work online for a while. It's taken me some time to work through issues with gateways and such, but I'm actually moving a lot faster now, and I've been really incredibly impressed with just how quickly Jane and your group has been able to move, and the depth of revelation that you've moved into. So I dearly enjoy reading everything that comes across, even though I don't always comment. And so the Lord's been pushing me to step out more, and started my own writing again. But I wanted to start getting online a little more and making connections and meeting you guys. And so mostly I just wanted to come and say hello and participate. So thank you for having me.
Oh, that's great, Eric. Oh, and I'm really glad that you were kind of been following. I wasn't sure kind of where you're up to, so that's really good. I think we've just been really blown away at what we've been shown. I mean, and what's really incredible is, I think what we've been shown recently about this new heaven and new earth is almost, it's almost like the tip of the iceberg for a whole new level of revelation as well, which I think is really exciting, and will probably stop us all getting very religious and just repeating like the old protocol. But I think it's an immense new, what's the word, door, I suppose, door that's just going to be, I just really sense it's going to be so profound what we're going to encounter in the next year or two.
Yeah, I just want to throw something else in there that I know the Lord's been pushing me so much over the last month or two to speed things up. And I have that exact same sense of things, is that part of the urgency is just to step into some of the vastness of the new material and the new revelations.
Yeah. Anyone else got any comments even about the journey? Because I think the journey is a really interesting issue, and it was actually one of the things I was given revelation on first, was the journey, but it was interesting that it was actually something that really I could see there was not a huge interest in. And I could see at the time there was a lot more interest in all the quantum science, and I knew if people didn't grasp a new way of doing the journey, they would struggle and they'd fall off. But the revelation for me was so clear. Well, in fact, actually, I'd been given the revelation for quite a few years before I got into Heavenly Realms. I could see so many different ways that we weren't doing it right to actually live out and be a full-blown son. But yes, staying with the journey, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that people have got to face, is how do they cope with the overwhelm? Where do they go? How do they start? How do they balance between tree of life and tree of knowledge? Do they engage people? How much do the ecclesia do they engage, or how much do they do on their own? And I can see, because I've engaged so many people for so long now, I can see all these different streams of people doing things a different way. Some say to me they don't they can't trust anybody, so they need to just really be quite isolated and listen to God on their own, and then they know what they can trust, which is an interesting approach. But I still don't kind of quite get how the ecclesia has a voice if that's the case. And then you see others who, some are just doing academic learning and not going into any encounter for quite a few years till they've got a lot of knowledge, which has a benefit to a point, that you're not so fazed when things actually happen because you understand what's happening. But then I've seen other people who don't go for much knowledge go into heaven really quickly without much knowledge. They actually flow really well and get very hungry and very passionate and very inspired. But I've also seen a little bit of a drawback in the sense that some things they don't have no concept. So when they're faced with it, it's quite a trigger. So yeah, how you get that balance is a key question. Has anyone else got anything they'd share on what's worked for them in terms of the journey?
I think that the big thing about the journey is you got to keep moving. People of Israel in the desert mean either camp or you journey, and I suppose there's some camping that's involved as you learn things and concentrate, but on a particular thing. But you've got to keep moving, and being afraid of making a misstep and getting it wrong, and because of that you don't step at all, is a danger. And then there's that very unexpected point when you start coming into sonship, and all of a sudden you're not getting as much leading as many anymore, and it's more like I remember as a kid sitting on the back step in the summertime with a friend. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? It comes to a place where God the Father is saying, what do you want to do? And it's not just about what he wants to do. I mean, it's like, it's okay if you make some choices here for yourself, and any one of them is okay, as long as you just keep going. And that threshold, when you start crossing over into sonship and you face that, I didn't know about that when I got to that place. And I don't know how long I had sat there waiting to be told what to do and not realizing that it was up to me in many ways. I mean, there's broad outlines around me. Don't do this, don't do that. I mean, you get your 10 commandments and such. But inside that broad outline, you've got your choices to make, and it's got a certain destiny, but within that, you've got your own choices to make. And I think it's very helpful if people are not aware of that threshold to be made aware of that, so they don't get surprised by it and stay in that spot too long waiting for the next direction when it's not going to come.
Oh, I'm so glad you raised that, because I just feel that is really, my spirit's just jumping at that. That's really important to say. Yeah, because I think there's a whole, I don't know what to call it, whether it's a myth or a stumbling block, but I think it's huge, that, and if people can grasp that, I think that's will make a huge difference. And it was very interesting when I first started. I remember noticing two different approaches. I was one that the moment I heard about something, I set my desire on it. I desperately wanted to go to that place. I hungered after it, and I just, asked, can I go? And I explored every concept I heard of. And then I realized there was a whole group of people who were not doing that. And they were very much going to an encounter, waiting. If they were led, they went to a place. And that was how they got the assurance that they were it was okay for them to be there. And that quite surprised me, because I'd never crossed my mind of doing it that way. I was so hungry to find out, and I didn't see any issues of why I couldn't find out some of these things. So that's, yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it, that it's I mean, maybe the real answer is somewhere right in the middle.
Yeah. But the thing about it is, when you get to that place, if you do make a misstep, he will correct you. And if he has to do so firmly, he will do so firmly. But even then, it's not unloving. He'll do it gently if he needs to. But you know, I've been called to the teacher's desk and told that I did it wrong. But there was no anger involved. There was no reproach involved. There was no condemnation involved. It was just a strong, you did it wrong, when I did it wrong strongly. And I guess after a couple of times of that, I'm not afraid of making a mistake as much as I was before.
And I'd probably say it's the other way around, that there's more of a danger in the holding back than there is what we can do with making a mistake. I mean, the biggest thing I was told at the start was, you know, don't do anything unless you've got a mandate for it. And I would say that probably is one of the biggest issues just to watch. And I can see sometimes in when we get so passionate and excited about things, we can start taking on all sorts because we feel so enthusiastic. But to double check, we've got a mandate, and it probably also stops overwhelm as well, that, which is really good, so that we're not just joining anything that we see is on offer. But the rest, I've never really, I don't think I've ever felt there's any place I shouldn't have gone. I mean, there was the dark cloud. I remember the dark cloud was one that I knew you shouldn't really rush into, certainly not as a newbie, and you needed to really be almost ready for that and hungering for all that. But when I encountered it and decided to go there, I was really, really ready. And so for me, it wasn't a awful experience. It was so profound. It was so amazing, and I was just so in the right place for that. But that's probably one I would say for a newbie not to rush into, is the dark cloud. But the rest is pretty. It all just adds bits to the puzzle, I think. And even if you have to backtrack, that's not a bad thing either. Because I think there's probably a lot of people who haven't done an awful lot with the garden, and because a lot of us have moved on now to other concepts, we haven't gone back to a lot of things like that. And so if people have missed out on that, they can always go back there, and there's no issue with doing it in the other way around, I would say. What about others? How have you gone with your journey? What's kept you overcoming all the stumbling blocks? Because it's interesting, you really see how many people fall off for so many different reasons. And I think that's one thing we've got to say to people, anyone listening, is about triggers. If we can have a mentality that every time we're triggered, we don't withdraw, I think that will keep us moving forward. Because it is a journey of triggers, really, a journey of being able to give up virtually everything that you thought you could keep. It seems to be challenged somewhere down the track. So not withdrawing when you're triggering, but also wanting the truth over whatever thing you do spiritually for people, or whatever you have to give up. I know that kept me going, because I actually had spent 2 years working for and developing a church excellence framework for churches. 2 years without pay, without anybody telling me, to do it. I spent all this, and then God told me he asked me to do that because he was giving the church 2 years grace to listen and look and change. And after that, I had to abandon the whole thing. I mean, the moment I got into Heavenly Realms, I knew that this slowly was being chipped away, and it was actually of an old age, and I had to just leave all that and start again. So I was called right at the early start to give up a massive sacrifice, and also it was a massive change of direction for me as well, because I was running a charity and I'd given up that, and I felt so compelled that it was time for the church to be reformed. So I'd sacrificed huge things, and then I was asked to make another sacrifice. But it actually wasn't too much of a sacrifice in the end, because I was so excited about the new revelation. I knew it was higher, I knew it was better, and I knew it was going to be more fruitful than the old revelation. So I think there's always an upside when we're asked to give up anything. There's always things that we will get back, way more than we give up.
Well, for me, actually, I just listening to you, Jane, about talking about going forward, not holding back, and progressing. I've always believed in that, but I think what I found that is important to me is walking with Holy Spirit, because each one of us being individual, each one of us, Holy Spirit knows what we need. And so I can go by desire, and I can share desire, but at the same time, I also rely upon and depend upon and embrace the Holy Spirit to direct and govern my heart according to the things that I need in this journey. And one of the things I've found, I've been a believer for over 40 years, so I'm not a baby in that sense. But one of the things that I've found is that lately there's been such a stripping off to a place of things I've known and becoming a reality for me, even more of a reality. And one of it has been just to come to a place of personal identity with God, to come to a place to my true identity in God, which it's been good, but it's been a stripping away as well. It's been to a place where, like, I have a lot of the growth and progress over the years was related to the hierarchy system that we were all in some way influenced by, and so not just breaking away and repenting from every false image that I've ever walked in or looked for, and to a place where, I can say, wow, this is just between me and you, God. And I'm learning to define, not only who I am, but I'm learning to define my relationships with others, what the purposes from heaven are for my relationships with others, not just in a broad thing, but on a one-on-one daily understanding. And so that's really what's been happening with me lately, a lot of revelation of untethering. And also I in as much as I'm going forward with desire into different aspects of the realms of heaven, I personally like to have confirmational experience on things, not just to take what is being taught, because I've had a lot of teaching opportunity with Ian and others, not just to take that, but to desire the experience of it for myself as a confirmation. It's just something that I believe in. And another thing I do believe in too is whatever I get, I believe in putting it into a reality for me, into practice. And sometimes that means taking a little time before I'd share it. So, I love to share, but it also means, have I really applied that? Because I find that if I'm going too fast on things, then it just becomes one encounter after another with different things that you get, and you go, oh yeah, we can apply that, we can use that, this is great. And it doesn't seem to necessarily stick properly. And I want to be a good steward of the things I'm getting. So, that's some of where I'm at. But I'd say probably the major thing is coming to this place of redefinition.
Interesting. Really interesting. Yeah, I think that's that question about when do you share something and do you dwell on it for a while has been really, yeah, I've really been grappling with that. And I don't know where I stand on it, but I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. Because there's two angles to it. On the one hand, even if we do see something and we confirm with us, on our own, with God, do we still need others to really ratify that that's a valid concept? But say, for example, we're completely off and we share something and then somebody takes it purely face value, oh, it's true, and could they then have a distorted concept, like a distorted encounter because of it? Is what I've been delivering. But
I think I would test it out. That's why I would, walk with it in my own walk with God on it, test it out. And it depends on to what level of the revelation it is. Some things I could feel free to share right away. But something that, is a bit of a mind-boggling thing that I think I'm getting, I may take some time to just really get more assurance from the Lord. I mean, I think it's great, freely we receive, freely give. So, and I think it's good that we can share and say, well, this is what I've experienced. What do you think about that? Because I love that part. But I think it's great to journey together. And I love the fact, the way that we're doing it differently. So all those things are good.
What's your take on all this, Bill?
I was just thinking as Michelle was talking that there are some things that I'm very transparent, but I am learning to hold back on some things that I'm shown, because some of my own private experiences in heavenly realms are a very personal I love you from the Lord, and they're not meant to be shared as general revelation to everybody else. Maybe the general concept would be something that could be shared, but the details really were very personal and very specific. I love you from him to me, and it wasn't meant to be shared. There's some secrets between lovers that are meant to be kept between lovers, using that as an illustration. That was my thought on that. And then I think that maybe we're back to the ages concept too, that there's a wisdom in what you specifically share with specific individuals is based upon where they are. And you need to have that infused knowledge that you've been speaking about, that knowing about what somebody's ready to hear. Otherwise, what you share of your experience may not be of any help to them whatsoever.
Mm.
On a one-to-one level, that is, or even a one person to a group level. It's a whole different thing when you're writing a page up for the Ecclesia framework, but people can pick and choose amongst what they're reading, you know.
Mm. Mm. Yes, someone once said to me, and it really stuck with me. Well, it wasn't directly to me. They shared it on a podcast, and it absolutely hit me. They said, "Oh, yeah, people have got to be at the point of asking the question before they're ready to get any sort of input." And I thought, yes, you're right, because if we're pioneers as well, we can get so far ahead of people that they're not even asking those questions. So whatever we're sharing becomes irrelevant. Although if you write it down or you record it and down the track, someone might listen to it and it's relevant then. But for addressing people's needs here and now, I think that's why we've got to get questions. But what I'm finding hard is not finding the volume of questions coming through. It's almost as if people are shell shocked with so much information that's so new to them that they don't know how to ask a question, because it's like, oh, it's like, like a sort of 3-year-old being put in university and they're saying, come on, ask me an academic, a really good academic question. And they're like, what? Just tell me some more information, because I don't know where to start. And that's the challenge I find. Or people are feeling like, oh, well, that's too simple a question. Everybody will obviously know that. I can't ask that. Because I imagined when I set up the groups, there would be so many questions. I mean, I had a million questions. And I was quite surprised at how many questions didn't come forth. Even things like, how do you operate in the garden? What's your own garden? The 4 chambers of the heart. I thought there'd be so many questions about that. And there wasn't. And there was more other issues which surprised me, which I didn't have questions on. It was, in fact, it was the opposite, really. People were asking questions I didn't have questions on, and not the things I thought they would. So I still don't know how to address that.
I think there's 2 things that come to mind as you say that, Jane. One is, well, I'm losing the second one, so we'll just give you the one. It's a matter of that trust and honor. I mean, we're all coming out of a learning situation where you take a risk when you put your hand up and you say something as to how you're going to be accepted, as to whether you're right or wrong, and how that is going to be accepted. And I've come to the place personally where I've got trust now, so I'm willing to ask the question, knowing that even if I'm off somehow, I'm not going to be in any way less than fully honored. But I think all of us are coming from situations that are not like that at all. And we're also coming from situations where everything's coming from the pulpit and we sit in the pew and our job is simply to listen. And nobody's ever given us a chance to ask questions. We don't even know how to do it.
Yes. I mean, I think that's probably just really illustrates why we need so much change in the new wineskin, doesn't it? Because really we should be like little children. You know how curious little children are? They're asking a million why questions. They're anything you give them, they're turning upside down. What can I do with this? How can I change that? That's the kind of healthy child. That's a sign of a healthy child, isn't it, really? And one that isn't healthy is one that is just sat there, is so scared to say anything. And maybe that is the season we're in, is actually restoring that healthy child kind of values of curiosity, of confidence, of free to be who they are and ask silly questions, and no one's going to turn around and say that's silly.
Unfortunately, I would say an unhealthy child is one that went to school and went to church.
Yeah, it knocks all their enthusiasm out of them, and yeah, and I think that's maybe something we can just say on this podcast. If there's people listening to this podcast that are new, that are scared, and we are really trying to create, and I believe we have, because we've been doing this for quite a few years now, many of us. So in whatever environment you go to, not just Ecclesia Framework, but some of the others, I believe we have created in those environments an immense honor culture. And so there should be no fear really of being ridiculed or anyone saying that's a silly question. You might not get the answer that you like, because we can't, if something's true, we can't change that truth, if we really believe that that's the change that God's asking us to make. So sometimes the answers are a shock for people, but in terms of the culture, I would say the new wineskin now really has that strongly embedded, that people are certainly not mocked or even dishonored for asking. In fact, they're honored. In fact, I think the more challenging questions people ask, the more they're honored, because it makes us all think harder about what we believe. And I think also that's what's missing. If we don't get a lot of questions and a lot of dialogue, a lot of us will not know why we believe what we believe. And I've found this now, actually, there are certain things I didn't receive a lot of challenging questions on when I was first encountering them. And now if I go back and I have to try and explain why I believe certain things, apart from the fact that I might have encountered it in heaven, I'm like, there's a bit of a gap there, because I haven't had that challenging dialogue. Whereas when I've ever had the challenging dialogue, I've always grown. Even if it's hard and someone's saying what all you're doing is totally stupid and a waste of time, it has made me grow, because I've grappled with it in heaven as to why we're doing this, and I've come out with a really strong conviction of what we're doing. So I would say the more challenging questions you can ask, the better. In fact, someone last week left the group because they were fearful that their question was not showing unity. And I actually wrote to them and said, no, please, this is what we want. This is what we want. The challenging questions cause us all to think and go back to heaven and say, well, why are we doing this? And show me more, and we form deeper roots.
Shane, the other thing besides the issues we've discussed is one more issue, and I think sometimes when we've been on a discovery or that kind of situation, and you open your mouth and try to explain to someone else what you just learned, and you don't discover you don't have the words for it until you open your mouth. And then you discover you have no way of really describing it. The terminology hasn't even been invented yet until somebody has a dialogue to discuss it and say, okay, let's call it this. And now we can be talking about the same thing. There's some of that going on too. We just don't have the words for describing what's been happening out on the edges of what we've been discovering.
Yeah, it's definitely getting a whole new vocabulary for these things is the challenge. And I think the transition is hard, because a lot of the words we're using now and getting comfortable with are not churchy Bible words that we're all familiar with. So I can really appreciate how hard it is for a newbie to come in and then suddenly it's all kings, mountains, mandates, blueprints, you know, words that we're not used to, legislation instead of praying. So in that sense, we've all got to be able to know why we're talking that language and we're not talking the old language anymore. To help people through that transition, which can be quite rocky. It's a huge change, but I think the thing that helped me in the early days was I got a grasp of the big picture really quickly from heaven. I mean, it just came. I mean, I just knew within months the huge calling we were called to. In fact, I used to think for years sitting in church, I used to think, why are we doing this when we're sons of God? Why are we doing all these religious things? We should be doing way more than this. So I was ready for that. And I always felt like I never knew what to pray. And, you know, was I just praying this and that? And I was never really seeing that it was the right blueprint. And I didn't know how to get the blueprint. And I wanted to be like some of these prophets. And I had no idea how they ever got to that stage of being able to say, this is what God's doing. So I was so ready for some new language that would show me the way to get there. So for me, it was incredibly refreshing. It wasn't challenging, but I can understand for some it is. And yeah, how we move them forward. I mean, I would love any more feedback as well if there are gaps missing. You know, that you think, oh, we haven't really explained this or that, or I mean, Kathy, you might be a good one to ask on this because you're new to Ecclesia Framework's sort of material and things. As you look at it, does it flow for you, or is there like huge gaps that you think, oh, I don't know why they're talking about this or that, or?
No, I think it flows really well. I think it's really helped me a lot.
Oh, good. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, it helped too. And once I finally took the first step, then everything started falling into place.
Oh, that's interesting.
I realized that I was waiting for everything to be in perfect alignment before I did anything, before I really moved, you know.
Yeah.
Into something. So yeah, it's really helped a lot.
Oh, that's really wonderful. And can you share anything about what's helped you keep moving forward and not get sort of knocked off the journey? You're aware of that's.
Well, one thing, you know, I really like the messenger groups that you have and the connections that are starting to come out of that. And meeting with Bill the other night, I just see the importance of gathering with the others. Meeting with Bill the other night and doing an ascension for the health legislation or the health bench was huge. And then plus the ascensions that I'm doing now with groups, those are so important. It's almost like you should do them every day. Because it brings more enlightenment to you on things, and that's just been real key for me.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you get like tormented with a spirit that kind of says, what are you doing, this is all silly, do you get any of that?
No, I don't think so. Not really. I've had some challenges come lately from other people about going to heaven isn't true. But no, I don't think so.
So your spirit's like really ready for this, and it's all resonating.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the one, I mean, I just feel like it's easier for me to engage altogether now, even just from stepping in together with the group and the things that we've encountered, and then being able to go back and revisit.
So would you say doing encounters has really helped you see more?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest challenges we get is I think there's a whole section of people who are stuck in feeling they can't see, so they can't join encounters. So then it's a lot about head knowledge. And it's how do we help those people over? And I mean, I've talked an awful lot about getting on encounters, but it doesn't seem to be happening. I think there's still an awful lot of fear going on.
Yeah, you know, at my ecclesia the other night, we're still kind of new at meeting, and it was a smaller group, and I wasn't feeling very well physically, and I knew it was going to be a short night, and they wanted to step in at the end, and I really didn't want to, and I've never had that happen. And we went ahead and we stepped in. It was very short and very sweet and very helpful, and the next day we had a lot of confirmations. It just confirmed a lot of them growing and us all growing together and becoming more united. So even though I didn't feel like it, and I really didn't feel like I was even seeing that well, because of some things, I still just what little I had ended up being huge, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point, because one thing I've been really asking wisdom about is this whole thing of individually discipling people, or the question of fathering more corporately. And I've been really surprised with the answer that what I'm seeing more and more is each of us now has got to such a level of maturity that the others, that so many could not overcome the stumbling blocks to get here, that even if we feel we're a newbie, that's actually huge maturity compared to the majority of the body, that we are now being called to almost father generations in the sense of how, say, Moses fathered, compared to, you know, our typical expectation would be we might disciple a few people, we'll help a few here and there and this and that. But it's like the calling is no, because you've really run the race. You've got through these immense stumbling blocks. You're one of the few who's got to this level, and therefore you're needing to father huge groups of people, such as, you know, which is just really showing me the magnitude of the calling that many of us are now being faced with, which is quite a challenge. I mean, you know, I think all of us would probably say, you know, I never thought it would get to this level, that was called of us. But having said that, what an immense honor. And really, if you look back at a lot of the forefathers, they're probably in exactly the same boats. I mean, we've put them all on pedestals now because we've, you know, analyzed their material for years. They've got credibility. But at the time, they never had the credibility. People were doubting them. They knew them personally, so they didn't, you know, esteem a huge greatness to them. And I think that's what we've got to face, is that some of the things we might share, we will not get the honor for it that probably it is worthy of at the moment, because it's all fresh to society. But if we don't look for that honor from people, but we look to just do the Father's will be motivated to keep going, even if the rejection is stark, or there's there's lack of honor. It's hard to explain to people, really, because I can see now why. I can see the different dimensions, but when you're in it, you don't realize how precious it is. I mean, I think what I was shown as well is, can you imagine being in the time when Jesus appeared on the earth as a man, and there were a few who chose to see the magnitude of who he was, but the rest were very dishonoring. And how easy it is for us to be those same type of people, really, who just miss the magnitude of what's happening and the magnitude of what revelation people are coming out with. Like, for example, like Mike Parsons came up and did a lot of the 12 laws of Zion. And they, to me, were some of the most precious things. I was desperate for him to articulate those confidently. I can remember at the time, and now that I think that those are of such magnitude that they are really, getting on for like the 10 Commandments. But because they're from a person we know and we can contact and is in our generation, we can easily, well, who's this person? How come they could say this? So we've got to almost change our mindsets that people can have immense revelation of the magnitude of Moses and not dishonor them. And if we can change that mindset, I think we will move forward. But if there's such a movement of people dishonoring this new heavenly realm stuff, it could become so discouraging that in the end it fizzles. So I think the challenge is to what extent are we going to just get rid of old mindsets? I mean, one of the interesting things I had right at the start, which I've not heard hardly anyone talk about it, but it was actually shown to me, in the early days before I'd engaged anyone really and talked about anything, was the Sapphire Cube. And I saw in there how we could go in and get revelation equivalent of the 10 Commandments. And it's almost as if we go in there and we can write on the walls, because we're getting this download. And I see that when I go in there, I see the living letters, and I see the living letters like forming these blueprints, I suppose you could call them, a bit like the 10 Commandments. And that's the magnitude of what I think we're called to, is that we can all write those. So every time we write something, it's really could be equivalent of that sort of 10 Commandments type magnitude. But because it's modern day and we minimize the value of things, we just see it as somebody's blog. But if we can get over that and absolutely give the honor to everyone who's writing something, I think we'll have a whole new culture that will form the foundation of a new wineskin that is so healthy, that is not triggering and withdrawing into denominations versus on the basis of what you feel you can cope with in terms of your own comfort, but is a one united body who will examine truth openly to the intense depth that they're willing to challenge their own lifestyle. And I think that's when we'll get the truth. We'll get the real truth that we were always meant to get centuries ago. Don't know, what do you think to that?
Interesting that you said that about the Sapphire Cube, because as you were speaking, I just saw it. I saw, myself actually writing there. It was really cool.
Oh,
But
really?
I was thinking about the Ten Commandments, and I was thinking, yeah, but you take one of those, even just one of those commandments, and you can extrapolate it in amazing ways. And so I was just sort of pondering on that. But I also wanted to just say something about some of the things that you said before, and I'll see if I can remember what I was going to say, because it was just a while back that you had. Oh yes, I remember. One of the things I think might help people really sort of step in, to participating and to participating is if we don't. I think sometimes to use a word that's new, like legislate, mandate, and things like that we're using, is necessary because it jolts people, and they thought that everything was, they were just at the pinnacle of everything that there was, and now they're hearing something that they don't quite gel with. So what is that? And so in that sense, it can be a good thing. But in another way, finding language that would help people come from one place to another. In other words, say, instead of saying ascend, just say, well, you know what? Jesus opened the way. And he said, I want them to be with me. So we can just join in and be with him. And it will help people in a simple way. Like when we talk about legislation, we can just say, we're called to rule. And what do you think that means? And so you take people by the language they understand into those realms, because I think sometimes that language is foreign to them, but also puts them off. And I think we also need to watch it, that we don't become a clique with our language, that people just don't know who we are and where we're from.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting you said that, Michelle, because I was actually making a comment to my husband a couple of days ago along these lines, and I said we shouldn't talk about it being this word or this word. We should just say, we do this, and because most of it, I think, is really what we are. Like, I think most of the time when people are actually really close to God and engaging God, they're in heaven, but they don't realize it. But we've decided to call it now, we do an encounter in heaven. But we could just talk about it as, we just going into a deeper relationship with God. That would stop maybe some of this. I mean, it could even, down the track, we could even find we have, the heavenly realmers versus the non-heavenly realmers, and a division that may not actually be necessary.
God forbid that happens.
Yeah. That's just come to me, but I can see that. So I think it's a very good point you raised, Michelle. We might need to really keep thinking about our language and seeing if we can soften it somewhat. I know I have done this with some of my pages recently. I've gone back and I've changed the titles and the words, because I've just suddenly looked at it with fresh eyes and thought, that's not even a question to you. Like I think I had one, how do you discern daily mandates? And now I look at it, I think, that's just, mandate's not a good word. We need another word. Because we've got to speak in more language that people is natural as well, I suppose. Because
one thing that I think is so key is that what we really are facilitating is helping individuals to come into a deeper intimacy with God, and they have to be able to do it from a free point of view. Like, as long as we say to them, well, we need to engage the four faces of God in the beginning of the day, what we're doing is we're basically putting them into somebody else's what they do. And so we just need to realize that to help a bunch of people, especially those that maybe we're going to come to that have never known the Lord yet, have had no grid for it, to help them come straight into God, we can't tailor make it. We have to find a way to literally facilitate the individuals in their own way, without trying to tailor make it.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's a very interesting question, really, isn't it? It's and what I found on that is people will find their own route. When I've dialogued with a lot of different people, you see they've all come via very, very different routes. So there is something where the Holy Spirit is leading them in a way that's right for them, and they've ended up at the same place, which is interesting in itself. Which maybe does raise the question: how much do we need to really provide for people? How, to what extent can they do it themselves? But nevertheless,
sharing an encounter the way your own encounter or experience is great, and saying this is how the Holy Spirit's leading me. At the same time, you have this relationship with Holy Spirit, you trust him to lead you, and so you're saying, I find the value in this because and I'll explain it, and then they can look at that and say, well, that's interesting, but as it's not a formula, or it's not put out there like this is the pathway to do a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I'm seeing is most people are not actually taking a set pathway either. Even if you do say, oh, this is the manual, most people are doing a little bit of one thing, then they're finding that it's becoming dry, so they're moving on to something else, and then so they are following. Interestingly, they do seem to be following more a path of the tree of life, which is exciting. That's kind of, I think that's probably just shows the level of which we start to hear when we get into the deeper realms of heaven. We do hear so much better that we can find that path. And I was quite staggered with mine because I had no one to really give me any form of guidance. I mean, I remember I heard a few podcasts, and then I was like, okay, where do I go from here? And everyone I knew didn't know of a lot, and there wasn't much out there. But somehow I kept getting these immense revelation, or little snippets of information, which I then applied in heaven, which gave me immense revelation, which kept me on this incredibly hungry path. That I remember I was just so hungry by about 3 months into looking at this stuff, and I was looking around at everyone going, how come you're not so hungry as me? This is the most profound thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm abandoning everything for this. But I was so clearly so led. It was just amazing, and I seemed to be able to discern things that didn't seem to be that important. I kept asking the question, what's the most important things I need to know? Because you can see there are so many different pathways people can go on, and there's some that have gone very much down learning Hebrew, learning the living letters, embracing a lot of the Hebrew traditions. There's all that path. Then there's the whole path around the quantum physics and how much do you learn of the science, and I can see a whole lot of people going down that path. And then there are those that are more practical legislation that spent a long time learning how to actually formulate court cases in a very formal way, but haven't looked at a lot of other stuff. It's mainly been about court cases and the courts. And then there's a whole load who've don't look at that at all, and who go down, how do you embrace intimacy? And there is just multiple ways. But one thing I think that's helped me is constantly asking, what do I need to know this or not? And if you can develop that discernment in your spirit as to what is useful and what isn't, and what can you just grasp as a concept rather than knowing the in-depths and depths of the why and wherefores, that can really guide you. Like, there's one thing I did feel led to say today. That one thing I was shown in an encounter was around this whole thing about the Hebrew traditions and about what the one new man was. And it's the one new man I saw was the two, the Hebrew and the Greeks, both moving but coming together. So we were forming a new thing, not the Greeks going back to the Hebrew traditions and replicating those. And that's what I see some doing, and that's what they see this is about, is moving back to the Hebrew traditions and the festivals and all that. That's not what I see. I see the Hebrew, the Jewish people are meant to move too. So they're meant to become less religious and let go some of their festivals, which have become religious, just as the Greeks and those who thought too linearly are meant to abandon that mindset and think more in a Hebrew circular culture. So we can form this new culture of the one new man. And yeah, that's I don't know if...
I like that, Jane. I think that's really good. I was thinking about that the other day too, and I was just thinking, how Paul said, don't bother the Gentiles with all those other things. And I was like, there seems to be such an interest in it. Now, it's not that I'm not interested, but I do agree that what does the heavenly ecclesia look like? And I think it's something we're all to discover. It's not the one, it's not what we've known trying to come together. It's all coming together to something we haven't known.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious, really, isn't it? When you say it like that, I mean, it's got to be, hasn't it? Because God's such a creative God that he's certainly not going to take us back to some old traditions. There's got to be so much that we've never, ever understood, or it's been hidden for various reasons, that it's got to be so new. But there must be something in human nature that we want to go back to something that we know has a lot of roots, so that we can feel that it's okay. And I'm guessing that's what's driving a lot of some of the routes people have chosen to take. I mean, the other question I've had is, to what extent do you need to know the in-depth of the living letters as well? Because it's not something I've ever really felt hugely led to learn the ins and outs of. But I know for some, they are doing that. And, I don't know if the fruit of it is paying off in the end, although some can recognize letters in heaven, and they know what they mean. But for me, what was interesting is, whenever I've engaged the living letters, it's been more around word. It's been a word. It's been a group of living letters together that have actually said a word, and I knew what that word meant. And also I found the living letters were like engaging me like the seven spirits. So I never personally felt the need to know what they were academically. Although I can see it brings some depth to some concepts. I mean, I do see that. I don't know, what any of you...
I mean, I just want to go back to, well, anyway, here's what I wanted to say. I think we have a whole lot of folks sitting in our chats that are coming to us already at the king level and don't know it. And they're thinking that they don't know, and they're thinking that they're not there, and they're already there, and they're not aware of it. Do you have any sense of what level folks tend to come to us at? Is there across the board large number of people coming in at that level?
That's a tricky question. But I do agree with you around that. There are definitely an awful lot who are kings who don't know it.
Yes.
But it really depends where people come from. What I've found is if anyone's going through Freedom Arcs material, they've come with a really strong foundation and they run really quickly with things because they've had that foundation.
Mm-hmm. So,
but if we get some others from other backgrounds, or even this is their first kind of encounter with heaven, they're all at really different levels, even to the point of they're not even at I would accept or even know about, say, the 4 chambers of the heart or the garden. They're even before that.
Okay.
There are people that are, I don't know how you describe them, they would openly say they acknowledge there's heavenly realms and that they're engaging them, but they've not actually seen or encountered any of this deeper material than a lot of us have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting challenge as well. And then there are others who just absolutely run with everything, but don't really know the in-depth, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. Because they can see and hear so well, and they've been doing that for years, and therefore they can flow with most of it, and they abandoned church years ago and they've no problems with letting everything of that go. So the challenge is we've got so many people from so many different walks, that how you get them all in the one melting pot is the challenge. But it's been incredible, the unity in the encounters. That's what I think is an absolute miracle from people engaging heaven directly. There's just been a beautiful unity. So I think that's what's good.
Mm-hmm. Some of those folks don't even need to know the terms; they just flow with it. I'm one that's looking for definitions. But
I mean, it's. I think it depends what type of personality you are. Some really want the ins and outs, and if they're used to intense Bible study, that would probably be a sort of person who would say, "Oh, well, I need to go and learn Hebrew, and I need to, spend intense time learning things like the living letters and what they mean." And they do bring a depth to encounters that some others don't have, who don't know that. But whether it would get them bogged down, I suppose that's the thing. You've just got to I know I've had quite a few people talking about, you know, how do you make a choice of what you look at, and how do you stop overwhelm. It's got to be joyous, fun. So if that's a guideline, that seems to work for people.
And just a few encounters can change your life. Even just one.
Yeah. But then sometimes there's people doing, I mean, there's some people got so hungry they were really doing encounters nearly like every day. And I was getting to that point at one point. Had so many different groups going, and but even that got overwhelming for me in the end, and then it started to become a bit dry. So I've seen with this, it's almost like you got to oscillate between things to keep that freshness. So sometimes, like, this dialogue to me is what my spirit craves more than an encounter. I need that freedom to talk about certain things rather than being led and in agreement with what everyone else is saying. And then there are other times I need encounters. Other times I need to hear some dialogue of what other people are experiencing. I need a podcast. I found I have to keep varying it to keep that beautiful flow of, what's the word, joy, I suppose. Oh yeah, and then personal application, and also what it means for my scroll, and where am I going to give my time, and also the flow. I found even what I do for other people changes as well, but that's good, I think, because you can get stuck in, say, in one or two things you're doing for people. Maybe you're discipling one person, and you might be, you know, leading an encounter, but even that, if you do it for too long, can get dry, and so you might need to move on from, you know, some things after a period. And I found it just seems to flow, though. Some things just gradually lose energy and momentum, and then they sort of fizzle out. And certainly with some relationships, they go strong for a period, and then that person seems to need something else, and so it sort of fizzles out. But I think that's good, because it brings freshness with somebody else and some new grouping, and it's almost like following in the flow of being in the river, really.
Let me throw one more thing out, just that I've seen, is that it's sometimes an impediment for people coming in and doing more is their personal circumstances, and also family, and how much support or resistance people have. I don't know a real great way to address that, other than that people have to take the time and do that personal ministry to the others in their lives, whether at home or sometimes at work, such that what we do here can be possible.
Good question, Eric. Anybody got anything to address that?
I don't have the answer, but I think Eric really has nailed the question. That question of balance is such a key and very personal question for each one of us.
Yeah, I'm really glad you raised it, actually, because I think it's one of those things that actually I don't think we've really talked about, but it is a huge issue, and I know I've encountered it as well, and I've heard of others having huge issues. One thing I would say is I've really discerned in the spirit that, how do I put this? We're going to be, Jesus says, oh, you've got to give up your mother, father, and brother and sister. I really discern that this is the journey. We are being called to put God before family, and there will be huge spiritual resistance. And you're seeing it. I'm seeing it an awful lot. That often in couples, the one will be into it, the other won't, and you very rarely see both. And it's as if. Well, no, it's not as if. I know. I was shown this really early on. It is the separating of the wheat and tares that's going on. So I think we mustn't come with unrealistic expectations that this is all going to be lovey-dovey. We're going to be able to just do a little bit in the courts for our families, and they're suddenly going to just want all this and journey with us, because this is really, really exposing the hearts of all of us, and the walk with God, and how much is really genuine and how much is deep, and all of that, and how much we're willing to be a sacrifice and give up things. So it's a stark journey that we've got to count the cost for, and one of the costs might be that our family or our friends or our closest may not want to journey with us. I had this very right at the start in terms of my friends. I had a huge community, local. I mean, it was gorgeous family. I love them to pieces. We did heaps together. We all lived near each other. Not one wanted to come on this journey with me. Not one would barely look at a podcast. And I had to make the choice of whether I would stay with where they're walking and how they were doing church, or was I going to go for what I believe was the truth and what my calling was and my destiny. And I chose this, and to this date now, that's been maybe 3 years, 4 years, not one has come along this journey with me. And sometimes I'll write to them, and say a few things and say how wonderful it is and all the stuff we're learning, and not one has shown a fraction of an interest. And it really, really hurts me, and so sad that we can't journey together. But I think that's the nature of being a disciple, really. We have to make a choice of what was most important to us. Not to say that we can't do something and some will move, because we can definitely go in the courts and do stuff on behalf of our close family as well and our bloodline. But it might not always be as romantic as we'd hoped. Anyone else got anything on that? Or
I think we should be encouraged in it, simply because it's Father's will that there would be a testimony, of what it looks like for a family, for husband and wife, and for a family to be walking together with Holy Spirit into what He's doing in these days. So I think we should be encouraged. I think we should stand firm in the courts on things that we can do, especially as one flesh, on behalf of, our spouse, because we're one flesh in terms of Father. So I just would encourage everybody to go for that. Know that it's not, whenever we do go into the courts, it's always recorded, and there's heavenly angelic help for us, and it's the Father's will that there should be that testimony. So I think we should go for it in faith. That's my take.
Oh yes, definitely agree, Michelle. Yeah, I mean, certainly we don't want to have lower expectations in the early days. But what's interesting is I've seen a few as well when they're first starting out saying, oh, I can't do this or that, I've got a lot of commitments and family and a lot of things. But the more they've got into it and the more hungry they've got, the more that hasn't been an issue, and they've untethered from whatever's going on in their life and found the time and the way around that as well. So that's interesting, because I think that can often be a way of, well, it can be an excuse more than it can be a reality, I think. Even though we're motivated by the fact that, we believe time with our family is important. But there are often ways we can make both happen. So I think that's what I've seen with people who are really, really hungry. They can make both happen, and they can engage that rich time and the richness of doing things, and accelerate the way that they learn, and give up a little bit of things that they didn't really need, like TV, and before you know it, they've found a way of doing a new wineskin. And I know that worked for me. I would actually listen to a lot of podcasts. I was so hungry, I'd listen to sometimes 3-4 podcasts a day, and I would just carry around my phone with these podcasts so I could just do all this other stuff and still listen to all these podcasts. In fact, I would even put them on the moment I was getting up and I was getting dressed, rather than having that whole period of dead time. I would instantly just put something on, and I would be engaging heaven. So I'd be maximizing the amount of time I could use, because I was just so hungry for it. So there's always ways round, and I think it's a sign of hunger, I think, is to how much you want to change the way you do things to fit things in.
And do you think that the changes in us as we become, genuine, and we become more free and are being transformed, that changes in us should draw our family members, because we'll have a different dynamic in the way we relate with our family as we get transformed in the realms of heaven. So, I mean, by our walk with God, it has a ripple effect that if there was the conflict of, well, we need to go into the courts and we need to have this and we need to be in these new wineskins, there could be conflict or contradiction in relationship. But if there's just a testimony of a changed life happening in front of people, especially one that is expressing more and more the love and the peace and the joy of the Lord, it should be a draw card.
What do others experience of that is?
I'll throw something out, and then I'm going to have to go because it's getting late here and I have to go to bed to get up early tomorrow. But my experience of that is that, for certain people, it really does work. And it really does draw them because they can see the difference and see the change and see in you that it's real. But then there are some others that it actually forces them away. It's sort of like I knew I hated you before and now I really do. So I mean, it's like you said, Jane. I mean, there is some separation of wheat and tares, and it hurts sometimes, but there are certain people you just have to let them go. But otherwise, like, I mean, my wife certainly appreciates my more loving nature. So.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you said, Eric. Yeah.
Well, all right. Good night, guys, and thank you for having me. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, no, great to have you on. Thanks, Cohen. Bye. Yeah, we do need to wind it up shortly. It's Yeah, I just really wanted these to be no more than an hour and a half, maybe actually less. We've gone over, but yeah, we've probably come to a good conclusion, though. Would you say, unless anyone's got anything briefly they want to share before we close? No, all good. Oh well, thank you ever so much, guys. I appreciate your contribution. I'll just turn off the recording.